My father died on a Tuesday. By Friday, my husband had filed for divorce. He thought burying my daddy meant burying my money too. That man had no idea what my father really left me. And when the truth came out, let me tell you, karma don't play. Before I tell you how this man went from sipping champagne in our penthouse to begging at my lawyer's office, hit that subscribe button. You're gonna want to see how this story ends. Trust me. My name is Candace Mitchell, and for 8 years, I thought I knew what my life was. I was 34, working as a pharmaceutical sales director, pulling in a decent 6 figures. My husband Trevor owned a luxury car dealership here in Atlanta. We had the house, the cars, the vacations in Turks and Caicos. From the outside, we looked like we had it all figured out. But you know what they say about looks, right? They're the best liars you'll ever meet. Trevor was 45 when we met. Confident, smooth-talking, always dressed like he'd just stepped out of a magazine. I fell hard and fast, the way young women do when an older man makes them feel like they're the only person in the room. We got married after a year of dating, and for a while, everything felt right. But looking back now, I can see all the little cracks I painted over, all the red flags I called pink. Money was always a thing with Trevor. He kept our accounts separate, said it was cleaner that way for his business. He was always talking about how tight things were, how the dealership had overhead, how we needed to be careful. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks, traveling 3 states over, closing deals and bringing home my salary. And you know what? I never questioned it. I trusted him. I believed we were building something together. My father, William Carter, he lived about 40 minutes away in a small house in College Park. Daddy was a retired postal worker, 72 years old, and the kindest man you'd ever meet. He raised me by himself after Mama died when I was 9. We didn't have much growing up, but we had enough. He made sure I went to college, made sure I knew my worth, made sure I understood that money doesn't make you rich, character does. Trevor tolerated my father, but I could always feel the judgment, the way he'd sigh when I said I was going to visit Daddy, the little comments about that neighborhood or his old car, or how I was babysitting a grown man. It hurt, but I brushed it off, told myself Trevor just didn't understand how close we were. Daddy never said much about Trevor either, but I'd catch him watching my husband sometimes with this look in his eyes, like he was reading a book he'd already finished and didn't like the ending. 3 months ago, I got the call that changed everything. Daddy had a heart attack in his sleep. By the time the neighbor found him, it was too late. My whole world stopped. I remember dropping the phone, not even hearing it shatter on the kitchen floor. I remember screaming so loud that Trevor came running from upstairs, and I remember his face when I told him. There was shock there, sure, but there was something else too, something I couldn't name at the time. The funeral was on a Saturday, small service, just the way Daddy would have wanted it. Some folks from the post office, neighbors, a few cousins from Alabama. I was numb through the whole thing, moving like I was underwater. And Trevor? Trevor spent most of the funeral on his phone, standing in the back, typing away, taking calls outside. At one point, I heard him say, "Once I see what the old man left, we'll talk." I was too deep in my grief to process it then, but those words stayed in my head like a splinter. After the burial, people kept telling me how sorry they were, how Daddy was such a good man, how he was so proud of me, and all I could think was that he was gone, and I'd never hear him call me baby girl again. Trevor drove us home in silence. That night, I cried myself to sleep while he scrolled through his phone next to me, the light from the screen cutting through the dark. 3 days later, on a Tuesday evening, Trevor asked me to sit down at the dining room table. He had this look on his face, serious but not sad, more like a businessman about to close a deal. He slid a manila envelope across the table toward me, and I just stared at it, confused. Then he said the words that broke something in me that grief hadn't even touched. "Candace, I want a divorce." I couldn't breathe. My father had been in the ground for less than a week, and this man, my husband, was handing me divorce papers. I asked him why, my voice barely a whisper. He gave me this rehearsed speech about how we'd grown apart, how we wanted different things, how he thought it was best for both of us. Every word sounded like it came from a script. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, and he just watched me like I was a stranger. Then he started talking numbers, said he'd give me $30,000 to help me get on my feet. Said I could keep whatever little inheritance my father left me. Said I should move out of the house within 30 days because, after all, it was in his name. Everything was in his name. The house, the cars, the investment accounts we supposedly had together. He'd made sure of that over the years, always with some excuse about tax benefits or business protection. And stupid me, I'd signed everything he put in front of me because I trusted him. But here's the thing that made it all click into place. As I sat there, drowning in shock and grief, Trevor's phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a message. "Baby, is it done yet? Can't wait to finally be together." The name at the top said Angela. I looked up at him, and he grabbed the phone, but it was too late. I'd seen it. Angela worked at his dealership. 28 years old, long weave, always wore those tight dresses that looked like they were painted on. I'd met her at company parties. She'd smiled in my face while sleeping with my husband. That's when I understood. This wasn't about growing apart. Trevor had been planning this. He'd waited until my father died because he thought I'd be too broken to fight back. He thought he'd get half of whatever Daddy left me, then ride off into the sunset with his mistress and a nice little payout. He thought he'd played the long game and won. The look on his face when I accused him was almost worth the pain. Almost. He didn't deny it, just shrugged and said, "You'll be fine, Candace. You're a survivor." I moved into a hotel that night with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. I cried for 3 days straight, not just for my marriage, but for the fool I'd been, for the years I'd wasted on a man who saw me as an investment, not a wife, for every time I'd worked late while he was probably with her, for every time I'd defended him to my father when Daddy would give me that look. The will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Trevor insisted he had a right to be there as my soon-to-be ex-husband. I was too tired to fight about it. We met at my father's lawyer's office, a small place in a strip mall off Candler Road. Mr. Bernard Thompson had been Daddy's lawyer for 20 years. He was a short man with silver hair and kind eyes, the type who looked like everybody's favorite uncle. Trevor walked in like he owned the place, expensive suit, cologne that probably cost more than most people's car payments. He sat down with this smirk on his face, checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. I just felt empty. Mr. Thompson offered his condolences, then opened up a folder on his desk. He started reading through the standard stuff. Daddy's house, valued at $180,000, a savings account with $43,000, a life insurance policy worth $100,000, all going to me. I watched Trevor's face fall with each number. This wasn't the windfall he'd expected. $300 and some $1,000? He'd probably spent that much on his mistress in the past year alone. He actually started to stand up, muttering something about this being a waste of time, when Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and said, "Please sit down, Mr. Mitchell. We're not finished." Trevor sat back down, irritated. Mr. Thompson pulled out another folder, this one much thicker. He looked at me with something like sympathy and started reading. My father, William Carter, owned 47 rental properties across Georgia and Florida, single-family homes, duplexes, small apartment buildings. He owned 12 commercial properties, including 3 strip malls and 2 office buildings. He had investment accounts with various firms totaling $8.7 million. When Mr. Thompson added everything up, my father's estate was worth $34.2 million. The room went so quiet, I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. My father, who drove a 15-year-old Honda and clipped coupons and wore the same 3 shirts on rotation, was worth $34 million? It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. But Trevor's reaction made perfect sense. His face went from pale to bright red in about 3 seconds. His hands gripped the arms of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. This was the fortune he'd been counting on. This was the payout he'd destroyed our marriage for. And now he was realizing he'd filed for divorce 3 days too early. Mr. Thompson wasn't done, though. He pulled out a letter, handwritten in my father's neat script. He said Daddy had written it 2 months before he died, like he knew his time was coming. Mr. Thompson read it out loud, and I started crying before he even got through the first paragraph. "My dearest baby girl," it started. "If you're hearing this, then I'm gone, and I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. These things to your face. I built this wealth over 40 years, one house at a time, one investment at a time. I lived small because I grew up with nothing, and I never forgot what that felt like. But I built it for you, so you'd never have to struggle the way I did." The letter went on. Daddy said he'd known about Trevor's character from the beginning. He'd seen how Trevor looked down on people, how he treated service workers, how he always seemed to be calculating the value of everything and everyone. He'd seen how Trevor pushed me to work harder while taking credit for our lifestyle. Daddy said he'd wanted to tell me, to warn me, but he knew I had to see it for myself. He said he was proud that despite everything, I'd stayed humble and kind, that I hadn't let money, or the lack of it, change who I was. Then came the part that made Trevor jump out of his chair. My father had added a clause to his will 2 months before he died. It said that if I was married at the time of his death, and that marriage ended within 90 days of his passing, my spouse would receive nothing. Not a single penny. Daddy wrote, "This is to protect my daughter from opportunists who might see her grief as an opportunity. Any man who would leave my baby girl in her darkest hour doesn't deserve to benefit from my life's work." Trevor lost his mind, started yelling about how this was manipulation, how it wasn't legal, how he'd sue, how that old bastard had planned this. Mr. Thompson stayed calm, said the will was airtight, told Trevor he needed to leave. Trevor knocked over his chair, pointed at me, said I'd planned this whole thing, that I'd known about the money all along. Security had to escort him out while he screamed that this wasn't over. I just sat there, tears running down my face, holding that letter from my father. He'd protected me one last time, even from beyond the grave. The next few months were a blur. Trevor tried everything. He contested the will and got laughed out of court. He tried to claim we'd made verbal agreements about sharing inheritance, but he had no proof. His lawyer dropped him when the retainer checks started bouncing. That's when I learned the truth about Trevor's successful dealership. It was drowning in debt, over $800,000 in the hole. He'd been taking out loans, maxing credit cards, all while telling me we needed to be careful with money. Turns out, Trevor had been banking on our divorce settlement to save his business. He'd already spent money he didn't have, probably on Angela, definitely on keeping up appearances. When that money didn't come through, everything collapsed. The bank foreclosed on the dealership. Then they came for the house, our house that was in his name. Angela left him the same week. Apparently, she was only interested in Trevor the successful businessman, not Trevor the broke failure. 6 months after the will reading, I was sitting in my new office, a beautiful space in Buckhead where I managed my father's real estate empire. I'd hired a property manager, an accountant, a lawyer. I was learning the business, honoring Daddy's legacy. I'd started a scholarship fund for children of postal workers. I'd converted 3 of the properties into affordable housing for single mothers. I was living in a nice condo, nothing flashy, driving a sensible car, being the woman my father raised me to be. That's when Trevor showed up. Security called me, said there was someone in the lobby asking to see me. I told them to send him up because I wanted to see this for myself. He walked into my office looking like a different person. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt. He'd lost weight, and not in a good way. His eyes were hollow, desperate. He sat down without being invited and started talking fast. Said he'd made mistakes, that he was sorry, that he'd lost everything. Said he needed a loan, just enough to get back on his feet. Had the nerve to say for old time's sake, like we were old friends instead of 2 people whose marriage he'd destroyed. He said Angela had left him, like I was supposed to feel sorry for him. Said he had nowhere to go, that he was staying with a friend, that he just needed one break. I let him finish. Then I stood up, walked to my office door, and held it open. I said, Trevor, my father taught me that real wealth is character. You showed me who you are when you thought I had nothing. Now you get to live with that choice. Security will show you out. He started begging then, actually begging, saying I was being cruel, that I'd changed, that money had made me cold. I just stood there holding that door, watching this man who'd once made me feel small now making himself smaller. Security came, and they walked him out while he cried about how this wasn't fair, how I owed him, how he'd given me the best years of his life. After he left, I sat at my desk and thought about everything. About Daddy working double shifts at the post office while quietly building an empire. About Trevor spending years setting up his perfect exit strategy. About how life has a funny way of giving people exactly what they deserve. I'm doing okay now. Better than okay. I met someone, actually. His name is Christopher, and he's a high school history teacher. Makes $45,000 a year and drives a Toyota with 130,000 miles on it. He opens doors, listens when I talk, and tears up during sad movies. He doesn't know how much money I have, and when I told him, you know what he said? He said, "That's nice, baby, but I fell in love with you, not your bank account." We're taking it slow, but for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. My daddy used to say, "Baby girl, not everyone deserves to see your hand before you play it." He lived by those words, and in the end, he taught me the most important lesson from beyond the grave. People will show you who they really are when they think you're at your weakest. Trevor thought my grief was his opportunity. He thought wrong. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago. Trevor got nothing, just like Daddy's will promised. I heard through the grapevine that he's working as a sales associate at a regular car lot now, the kind that sells used sedans to folks with bad credit. Angela married some businessman she met at a club. Trevor's living in a studio apartment in a part of town he used to call beneath him. Me? I'm honoring my father's memory every single day. I'm building on his legacy, helping people, staying humble, and remembering that real wealth isn't about the number in your bank account. It's about who you are when nobody's watching. It's about the lives you touch and the love you give. Daddy knew that. He lived that. And now, finally, so do I. My daddy used to say, "Baby girl, not everyone deserves to see your hand before you play it." He was right. If this story taught you something about trusting your gut and knowing your worth, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. And subscribe because I've got more stories about folks who thought they were slick but ended up slipping. Remember, what's done in the dark always comes to light. Always.